Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with Part 8, The Illuminati, of Masonic Orders of Fraternity by Manly P. Hall. The Illuminati. The name Illuminati has been assumed by or bestowed upon various groups of mystics and metaphysical intellectualists claiming to possess an internal enlightenment about divine or human matters. A number of sects may be included under this general title, as the Alumbrados of Spain and the Guerinets of France. In the present usage, however, the name Illuminati is most often applied to the order founded in Bavaria in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. This order was regarded with favor by a number of brilliant and outstanding men, including Goethe, Herder, Nicolai, Ernest II of Gotha, and Karl August of Weimar. From the Occult Review, Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt was born at Ingolstadt on February 6, 1748, and departed from this life at Gotha in 1830. His father died when the boy was only 7 years old, and his grandfather, Baron Istak, entrusted the early training of the lad to the Jesuits. The Baron had an excellent personal library, well stocked with works by French philosophers belonging to the school of reason. Weishaupt believed that he found in these writings answers to the doubts and misgivings which he entertained over certain dogmas of his Jesuit tutors. After graduating from the University of Ingolstadt in 1768, the young man served as a tutor and catechist until he was appointed as assistant instructor in 1772. As a protege of Baron Istak, who had large influence in the university, Weishaupt advanced rapidly and received the chair of canon law in 1773, a seat which had traditionally belonged to the Jesuits for nearly a century. 2 years later, the promising young professor was made dean of the Faculty of Law, assuming this heavy responsibility in the educational sphere when but 27 years old. Weishaupt married in 1773 against the wishes of his grandfather, and their friendship was never restored. There can be no doubt that Dean Weishaupt found himself in the midst of scholastic plotting and counterplotting. To him, the campus of the university was a microcosm of the world, and the conspiracies which flourished in the school symbolized the larger strife between reactionary and progressive factions. Although his motives and manners have been subjected to repeated criticisms by historians, it only requires brief contact with the modern campus to appreciate the dean's dilemma. Educational politics still flourish at the expense of essential learning, and the condition was much worse at the critical period when ecclesiasticism was fighting to retain its influence in higher education. The idea of a secret assembly or association to protect the liberties from the conservatives was incubated in the heavy atmosphere of Ingolstadt. The links with the past are obvious. Dr. Vernon Stauffer says of Weishaupt, his imagination having taken heat from his reflections upon the attractive power of the Eleusinian mysteries and the influence exerted by the secret cult of the Pythagoreans. It was first in Weishaupt's thought to seek in the Masonic institutions of the day the opportunity he coveted for the propagation of his views. Weishaupt founded the Order of the Illuminati on May 1st, 1776. The original membership consisted of 5 persons of resolute purpose but of uncertain method. The following year, Weishaupt became a member of the Society of Freemasons and was instituted into the Lodge Theodore of Good Counsel. At Munich, The lodge was virtually absorbed into the Illuminist order almost immediately. Early in his career, the Dean of Ingolstadt was fortunate enough to gain the assistance of two important and influential gentlemen. The first was Baron Adolf von Nigge, Privy Councillor of Saxe-Weimar. The second was Johann Christoph Bode, a man of upright character, high social position, and cultivated mind. Both von Nigge and Bode were Freemasons. Baron Nigge was deeply immersed in the activities of secret societies and had joined the Lodge of Strict Observance, which was dabbling with esoteric and mystical arts. The Baron, especially addicted to alchemical speculations, tried to affiliate himself with the existing Rosicrucian groups, but was unable to make a satisfactory alliance, at least such is the report. Like Nigge, a constant seeker after rare knowledge, Bode came to the Illuminati from the Rite of Strict Observance. He was a musician who turned bookseller and, as a sideline, translated into German the popular works of Fielding, Smollett, and Goldsmith. Bode had a wide knowledge of Masonic history and the origins of the rites, but he does not appear to have originated his opinions on these subjects. These three men, Weishaupt, von Nigge, and Bode, fashioned a secret society patterned upon the rites and rituals of ancient mysteries and dedicated to the perpetuation of esoteric knowledge and the social improvement of their fellow men. The Illuminist order never attracted a large membership. Historians hazard the guess that its strength did not exceed 2,000 heads at any time, but they were distinguished heads. The roll of membership is reminiscent of the Almanga di Gotha. A considerable percentage of the brothers were men of consequence, including reigning princes, noblemen, prominent educators, scholars, scientists, and men of letters. Most of these intellectuals were addicted, at least in private, to the opinions expressed so eloquently by Rousseau and Voltaire. Certainly there was an undercurrent of things esoteric in the most mystical sense of the word, beneath the surface of Illuminism. In this respect, the order followed exactly in the footsteps of the Knights Templars. The Templars returned to Europe after the Crusades, bringing with them a number of choice fragments of Oriental occult lore, some of which they had gathered from the Druzes of Lebanon, and some from the disciples of Hassan ibn al-Sabah, the old wizard of Mount Alamut. If there was a deep mystical current flowing beneath the surface of Illuminism, it is certain that Weishaupt was not the Castilian spring. Perhaps the lilies of the Illuminati and the roses of the Rosicrucians were, by a miracle of nature, flowering upon the same stem. The old symbolism would suggest this, and it is not always wise to ignore ancient landmarks. There is only one explanation that meets the obvious and natural requirements of the known facts. The Illuminati were part of an esoteric tradition which had descended from remote antiquity and had revealed itself for a short time among the humanists of Ingolstadt. One of the blossoms of the sky plant was there, but the roots were far in better ground. Weishaupt emerged as a faithful servant of a higher cause. Behind him moved the intricate machinery of the secret schools. As usual, they did not thrust their full weight to any perishable institution. The physical history of the Bavarian Illuminati extended over a period of only 12 years. It is difficult to understand, therefore, the profound stir which this movement caused in the political life of Europe. We are forced to the realization that this Bavarian group was only one fragment of a large and composite design. All efforts to discover the members of the higher grades of the Illuminist order have been unsuccessful. It has been customary, therefore, to assume that these higher grades did not exist except in the minds of Weishaupt and von Nigge? Is it not equally possible that a powerful group of men resolved to remain entirely unknown moved behind Weishaupt and pushed him forward as a screen for its own activities? The ideals of Illuminism, as they are found in the pagan mysteries of antiquity, were old when Weishaupt was born, and it is unlikely that these long-cherished convictions perished with the Bavarian experiment. The work that was unfinished in 1785 remains unfinished in 1950. Esoteric orders will not become extinct until the purpose which brought them into being has been fulfilled. Organizations may perish, but the Great School is indestructible. Of passing interest is the crusade of the Reverend Jedediah Morris of Charleston, South Carolina, against the threat of an Illuminist invasion of the United States, capitalizing on the proclamation issued by President John Adams, March 23, 1798, referring to the hazardous and afflicted position in which the country had been placed. The Reverend Morris preached with great fervor against the atheistic French state and its determination to corrupt the morals of the Western Hemisphere. A minor tempest followed, both sides of the issue resolute but uninformed. The Illuminati were presented as a huge association of godless persons determined to destroy the church and state. Reverend Morris depended largely upon certain memoirs of Jacobinism invented and compiled by Abbe Burrell and the attacks on Freemasonry, the Illuminati, and the reading societies by Dr. John Robertson. The learned doctor should have limited his interest to his chosen field of hydrodynamics, astronomy, electricity, and magnetism. His readings in Freemasonry seem to have undermined his critical faculties, for he decided that an association had been formed for the express purpose of corrupting all the religious establishments and existing governments of Europe. This group was the Illuminati, which had apparently been disbanded, but actually had extended its activities throughout the whole world. In the ensuing flurry, a number of excited clergymen quoted each other and sometimes themselves to prove the horrible hazards of the hour. George Washington was cited, Mr. Noah Webster orated, and politicians warned their constituents that opposing candidates were probably Illuminists in disguise. Of course, Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson received appropriate criticism, and it was even suggested that the American Society of United Irishmen was subversive. Masonic lodges were suspected of deep and dark doings, in spite of the fact that most of the patrons of the Revolutionary period, including General Warren, who fell at Bunker Hill, and George Washington, were Freemasons of standing and reputation. Actually, the Illuminist bubble was little better than the clerical hysteria, and there is no proof that there was any substance beneath the extravagant reports. If European secret societies of the period exercised an influence in the young American Republic, such influence certainly was not malevolent. The results, if any, are found in the separation of the state and church, a clear-cut policy in American government. George Washington stated firmly that he did not believe that doctrines of Illuminati or principles of Jacobinism had spread in the United States. At the same time, he defended the integrity of the Masonic lodges of his country. Jacques Cazotte. Among those who had received initiation into the school of Martinez de Pasquale was Jacques Cazotte, 1720 through 1792, usually included among the 18th century Rosicrucians. About 1775, he embraced the tenets and projects of the Illuminati. In his work, Le Diable Amoureux, Cazotte wrote profoundly of secret matters, and was accused of exposing information about the Adept tradition without authority. He was among the victims of the French Revolution and was executed on September the 25th at the Place du Carrousel. He was certainly in favor of broad reforms involving the rights of the people, but was not by nature or inclination given to violence or fanatical procedures. Jean-Francis de la Harpie, French critic and man of letters, was a follower of the new philosophy and supported the revolutionists as the editor of Mercure de France. Like so many of the intelligent liberals, he became himself a victim of the revolutionary zeal and was imprisoned for some time. As the result of his experience, he became a reactionary and, always, more or less an extremist, attacked bitterly that which he had previously defended with equal fervor. He died in 1803, and among his papers was found the curious Prophecies de Cazotte. There is no reason to doubt the authority of this somber document. Lee de Harpy described a banquet of the academicians held early in the year 1788. It was an illustrious company, including members of the French court, legal lights, and literary men. Present also were a number of ladies of importance. The dinner, enlivened by stories, anecdotes, and witticisms, was dominated by a Voltairean attitude on matters political and theological. The dinners finally concluded that an intellectual revolution would soon be complete and that in a few years, superstition and fanaticism would give place to philosophy. The various members of the company then conversed pleasantly as to which of them would live to see the reign of reason. During this conversation, one man sat quietly listening, but took no part in the general enthusiasm. It was Jacques Cazotte, his long hair hanging on his shoulders, and his quiet, noble face set in expression of profound sadness. At last he spoke. "Gentlemen, be satisfied. You will all see this grand and sublime revolution. You know that I am something of a prophet, and I repeat that you will all see it." Cazotte then rose in his place at the table and made the following predictions to the persons of the assemblage. "You, M. Condorcet, will expire on the pavement of a dungeon. You will die of the poison which you will have taken to escape from the hands of the executioner. A poison which the happy state of that period will render it absolutely necessary that you should carry about you. And you, M. Chamfort, you will cut yourself across the veins with 22 strokes of a razor, and will nevertheless survive the attempts for some months. You, M. Vicdesier, you will not open your veins yourself, but you will order them to be opened 6 times in one day, during the paroxysms of the gout, in order that you may not fail in your purpose, and you will die during the night. As for you, M. D. Nicolai, you will die on the scaffold, and so, M. Bailey, will you, and so will you, M. Malazerber." M. Rochi rose from his chair, remarking that it appeared that the vengeance of the time was to be leveled solely against the Academy. He then demanded his own fate. Cazotte answered quietly, "You will die also on the scaffold." At this moment, M. de la Harpie, who chronicled the incident, asked, "And what will happen to me?" Cazotte smiled. "You will be yourself a miracle as extraordinary as any I have told. You will then be a Christian." The Duchess of Graham-Mound remarked that it appeared that chivalry was not at an end. These predictions had not been directed towards the ladies. Cazotte bowed. "Your sex, ladies, will be no guarantee for you in these times. My Lady Duchess, you will be conducted to the scaffold with several other ladies in the cart of the executioner, and with your hands tied behind your backs. Greater ladies than you will have the same end. You will not even have a confessor. The last mortal led to the scaffold who will be allowed a confessor will be the King of France. Consternation broke out in the assembly, and at last a hesitant voice spoke. My good prophet, you have been so kind as to tell us all our fortunes, but you have not mentioned your own. Then you must know, murmured Cazotte, that during the siege of Jerusalem, a man for 7 days went round the round parts of the city crying in a loud voice, Woe to Jerusalem! And on the 7th day he cried, Woe to Jerusalem and to myself! And on that very moment, an enormous stone thrown by the machine of the enemy dashed him into pieces. M. Cazotte then bowed and departed. M. de la Harpie made a careful record of the predictions and their fulfillment. He bore witness to the fact that all the prophecies were fulfilled to the smallest detail. It was on his deathbed that he drew up the final statement of the outworking of the strange predictions. M. de la Harpie lived through the revolution and did become a Christian. Cazotte's remarkable powers of foreknowledge suggest a more detailed examination of the so-called political societies and their initiates. Everywhere in the operations of these groups were imitations and indications of an operative transcendentalism. Men like Saint Germain, Saint Martin, Cagliostro, Mesmer, and Cazotte cannot be explained by calling them shrewd opportunists, impostors, or adventurers. They certainly shared a secret kind of knowledge and were operating from a plane or a trestle board. While this dimension of their activities is denied or ignored, we can have no clear picture of the workings of the adept schools in the great century of revolutions. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.